Hello everybody, welcome back to Let's Play Hearts of Iron 4 New Orders Mexico. Let us continue on from where last left off. So, we have been introduced to the Mexican miracle, which is just, it's like too much to look at most of the time. But we'll keep our eye on it. Everything right now is going up towards, I believe, this baseline. If I'm reading how this works correctly, everything should start trending towards this line by default. Now, GP per capita, I don't want this to go down, obviously, but the rest, it should start going upwards in some capacity. The 12 disciples. How surreal it all was. Dressed in his Sunday best, Enrique, the first-year law student and first-time PAN campaigner, stood amongst the fighters for liberty. Stood before his hero, Salvador Rezea Magallon. Enrique had heard him speak before, of course. He greedily sought every speech on freedom, eagerly tracked every track to find. But how different to be one of the few brave arguing for genuine democracy in Mexico. Pride shivered through Enrique's frame, smiling. He took his eyes away from Roses just for a moment to see his fellows' joy and passion for the cause. He did not find it. The 11 campaigners in the room each carried a different expression. A certain grim determination from the elderly man in the corner, a hangdog look from the scruffy specimen, distaste and anger from the middle-aged woman fingering rosary beads in the back. At last, he would look at the understood if a. At last, he would have understood if a PRI politician were speaking, but for Rosas, Enrique shrank back a bit. His cohort may not have been what he was expecting, but it didn't change what he needed to do. If anything, he would just need to work harder to share the PAN's cause with more folks and to give a broader grin. And so, if turned his eyes, his mind further to the speech, farther from the campaigners to the door where the streets of Ensenada beckoned. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers few. I've got a feeling that our Enrique, our first-year law student, might end up at the end of this being murdered. I feel like, I don't know. I just feel like he's going to die at some point in the story. But we'll see how that goes for him. We have 33 points. Again, we're getting all of our projects going. These are all in the planning stages. Corruption. Stimulation impact is at 3%. Hopefully everything goes well. That's all we can really hope for right now. I'll report on our progress. Andrea leaned towards the radio to fiddle with the volume, making sure it was just loud enough before making her way back over to the clothesline. As she began to pin up clothes one by one, she could hear the voices from the radio finally speak loud enough for her to hear. His Excellency, the President Lopez Motillas, has just presented to the press an outline for all the goals he aims to achieve over the next 3 years in his government. His government will focus on steady and consistent growth across the whole of the economy, with particular focus on industrial growth and regions which offer new opportunities for the nation as a whole to share in our connections with the world. He promises continued support for key social services, which will further enhance the safety and security of the nation. The government will introduce new programs to continue its policies to eliminate diseases that ravage our people, including tuberculosis, polio, and malaria. Additional new hospitals will be built in Mexico's rural areas, coupled with further reforms for childcare to help the mothers of our next generation. Illiteracy has dropped markedly since the inauguration of His Excellency, and His Excellency vows to continue the fight to increase the mental fortitude of our youth with government-issued textbooks to transform the way our children learn. This policy, coupled with land reform, will lift hundreds of thousands out of poverty and energize our nation to new heights. As promised by His Excellency, now, onto the weather. Andrea began to tune out the radio as she put her focus back on pinning up the clothes. Her mind wandered to tonight's dinner. The long list of policies drifted further back from her mind. Mexico's prosperity marches on. Okay, next, let's go for... World loyalty would be nice. I mean, these all finish like really fast. So, I guess it doesn't really matter so much which one we take. We gotta take all of them anyways. And because, again, they're all 14-day focuses, they should, you know, the hits should just keep on coming. Okay, so decisions. Like, again, so Yucatan is the poorest. The Northwest. What do you actually do? Unemployment goes down 3%. Debt goes up by 10 million. How bad is the debt? 600? Let's sponsor industry here. The economic stimulation in the Northwest is at 51.4%. Okay, so let's see. Stimulation everywhere is looking... I mean, it's looking really bad in the South. So, you know, let's do some resource extraction infrastructure here. Yeah, we want to get our stimulation up. I mean, okay, you've gone into a lot of debt recently, but should be okay, I think. I'm hoping. I'm hoping it'll be okay. I don't want to bankrupt any of our states for, like, obvious reasons. It probably wouldn't go super well for us. Okay, lost production units. Prison breakout in Moscovin. The good news. The bus from San Diego traveled to a halt, and its tired occupants began to spill out into the square. Enrique positioned himself almost directly in front of its doors. Awkward, yes, but that was the price of democracy in Baja. As the workers attempted to move past, muttering, excuse me's, Enrique launched into his prepared speech. Wouldn't it be better if you could find jobs here in Baja? If the PRI so-called union wasn't a joke? Maybe you wouldn't have to go to the north for a decent pay. Literally, eyes rested on him for a moment, but he could tell most of his captive audiences just wanted to go home. Couldn't the PRI at least fix the potholes on the highway to give you a decent ride? No, they won't. Not because they don't have the money, but because they're too busy stuffing their own pockets to care about the hardworking citizens like you. That last line got nods. Enrique even heard a few angry cents. That's why we need change. Fresh faces in a fresh party. The PAN. A new voice for the states. Enrique's voice gave out as he was brushed aside by a sweat-soaked shoulder. The rest of the workers began dispersing, some even filing behind the buses to leave. One or two told them to keep up the good fight as they passed, but it appeared that liberty was no match for supper and a warm bed. A man does not live by PAN alone. My man is fucked. Like, Enrique is getting disappeared. I don't think it's going to go super, super well for him. Yeah, so the PAN is the conservatives here. Conservatism. There's actually two different conservative parties? Huh. Interesting. There's even two different communist parties. I didn't know you could actually do that in Hoi 4. Are they technically two separate ideologies? Or I wonder what's going on there, actually. The tiger hunts. The peanuts crunch between the agent's teeth. He paused for a moment to savor the light salt. When on stakeout, he played a long game. He made himself comfortable. Much easier in this car than in a ditch or on some concrete floor. He'd done that before. And would gladly do it again if it meant another commie or fascist put away for good. Which would it be this week? The agent knew his target was stealing military reports from his day job. That was confirmed. But who was he passing them on to? Could it be this anarchist enamored with Trejo? A spy for the gringos? An opportunist to grab briefcases of yen from the Japanese? You met so many interesting people when working with the directors of federal security. He swallowed and popped another batch of peanuts in his mouth. It was a good gig, DFS. Hell, it was the best gig. Used every instinct in his muscled body to track, corner, and beat the shit out of scum like that threatened the country. No one could hold him back. No one that he couldn't take down. Amidst the peanuts, a grin looked like a awful lot like fangs. A apex predator. So again, we are going, Fidel Castro's won the election in Cuba. We are going to be at war with the Dominican Republic. Because you remember when we played as United States, we did have that crisis regarding the Dominican Republic. And if you remember from that, that was a joint operation from Cuba and Mexico. So I think we are involved in that in some way. But we'll wait and see kind of how that works. A check-in. The president of Mexico opened the doors to his office. Or to an office. An office where, when both the president and its owner were in attendance, decisions which would affect millions were being made. Knocking on the door is a mere formality. The man inside knew he was coming, and listened to what Lopez Mateos had to say. Vicentio Veliquez, I see you've been very busy. The president looked at the stack of papers on his desk, belonging to the leader of the country's largest labor union, the Confederation of Mexican Workers. No doubt pertaining to preparations for the secession. The president commented no further. Fidel Veliquez looked up from his paper. Never too busy to host your excellency, of course. What news do you bring me? I thought I would keep you updated on my thought process surrounding my predecessor. As of late, Ordez's actions have kept me in doubt, let's say. Ordez, really? Interesting. I thought he had a position locked down. A look of concern flashes over the man's eyes, though Mateos continues. I won't think. Mateos knew that Ordez was Veliquez's preferred man for the job, and refraining from letting the issue linger. Anyways, I was going to ask about the infrastructure projects. If it's imperative that we remain steady, for you never know when we might have to use them for something. Lopez Mateos smiles. Olympic in scale. The two traded looks, and Veliquez took a hint. Of course, Your Excellency, they will. I am so ready to host the Mexican Olympic Games. Is that the 62, or do you think we're going to host like the 68 Olympic Games? I'm not too sure. But I'm ready to host the Olympics. A brief exchange. The United States Embassy building was nice enough, but Winston Scott preferred to get out of the office and see things firsthand. For the FBI bureau chief, taking in the sights and sounds of Mexico City was an essential part of the job, as was getting to know some of the important personalities. Kopatech Park was a lovely spot for a stroll. The trees provided shades in abundance, and Winston had visited the museums and zoos with his son and wife on occasion. Crowds of people milled about, with enough tourists interspersed with that the American's presence did not draw any particular attention. His eyes came to rest on a younger man, standing, as expected, along the banks of the lake. Lieutenant Po 1 did not see him approach, instead gazing out over the rowboats in the direction of Los Pinos. After a brief scan told Winston that neither of them were being watched, the FBI chief took a position at Limpo's one side. "Family doing all right?" he asked in fair Spanish. "We've been better," the man replied, clearly annoyed. "My uncle's in a bit of a bind. That tip you gave him provided to be a load of nonsense. And now his boss is back in town, he's got in a whole sleep of trouble." Winston handed over an envelope budget with pesos, at least 3 times the usual amount. "Tell your uncle to hold tight. We may not see eye to eye on everything, but we always can take care of our friends." 2 men, exactly where he wanted them. My man is being set up by the FBI. Okay. New leader in the Vietnamese government. And the pre-Olympic church. 8 a.m. And gentlemen, this is why we must begin mobilizing our resources. That being said, keep all resources on hush. Vatiquez meant it, and the CTM board understood. Our bid is not confirmed. Yes, Lucindio. Discrepancy, we understand. The CNC will hold a meeting discussing the plan shortly, and all regions will be informed. The aide hung up the phone, quickly calling in her boss to give him the news. 11 a.m. In the boardroom of the PRI offices in Guerrero, a voice booms. "We have orders from on high to accelerate all projects in the worker sector immediately." The regional CTM bosses looked on silently. "Get to it." 1 p.m. in Alquetio. The union boss meets with his subordinates in a small office downtown. "Something big is coming, and we are part of it. We need all dock workers on overtime shifts." Bosses looked on, concerned. "Orders are orders, and he's come all the way from CDMX. 3 p.m. "Here's what we need you guys to do." The union rep dodged the shipping container, barely keeping his head as he spoke to the supervisor. "Phew. So we need pontoons." That is 6 p.m. Martin sighed. His day was almost over. Working to the port entrance to clock out, his supervisor bumped into him with a box, handing it to him. "The fuck? Didn't you hear me? We have overtime this week." And a fisher of men. Enrique stepped out of his comfort zone and onto the pier. The boardwalk had been fruitless for the young PA campaigner, with too many tourists and, worse, an eerie feeling that he was being watched. Nervous, he took in a mix of woods and rust that made up the city's fishing fleet. A group of fishermen stopped to look at him. "You come for another fee? Spat one over the surf?" "No," said Enrique, a righteous anger rising in his throat. "No, I didn't. The opposite, actually. I'm looking to make sure honest men like yourselves never get shaken down by some PRI flunky ever again." His eyes widened. He hooked them. "How?" "I'm not going to tell you to join this or that sector or union controlled by the very people that rob you. There's another way. Vote. Vote to put someone who listens to you in City Hall. Not a PIR man whose only goal is to impress the governor." As heads bobbed in agreement, all that was left was to reel them in. "Take this pamphlet," Enrique said, soft hands defiantly pressing blue and white sheets into colorless palms. It has the names and photos of PAN's and senior candidates. As the doc launched into a spirited conversation, Enrique tried to gauge his hull. 15, maybe 20 votes? A few more days like this, and maybe PAN has a chance. From PAN to fish, miracles. If we can get the fish to vote, we'll be looking pretty good. Build public housing, some relief. Everything costs money. Have you ever noticed that everything's expensive? I've noticed that for sure. Poverty. I mean, you can annex these extremely high debts. Migration. Quality of life is so-so. Yeah, I didn't know it would cost this much money in Yucatan. Hopefully that's not going to be a problem. It almost certainly is going to be a problem at some point, but we'll worry about that in the future. Clank. That was the sound her wrench made as she thrust it against the metal sheet to tighten the bolt with the 5 quick turns. She had gone down to fix 6 quick turns in 6 months since she arrived from the farm. She tried to think about how much better this was than the farm. Clank. But the Colila sweatshop was not a good place to think. because those thoughts turned her aching arms, the grease that wouldn't wash out, the clank. She made just enough pesos to put tortillas on her table and sleep in a bed, so she could hear this clank and put tortillas on her table and sleep in a bed, and there wasn't a clank. The line had stopped. Manuel, the Confederation of Mexican Workers Representatives, had walked over. Along with others, she dutifully formed a semicircle around him. Manuel's voice began in a practiced hush. Brothers and sisters, I come with exciting news for you. To show our support for the revolution, the source of all of our rights as workers, the CTM has arranged transportation to Stelido for a rally. So take these banners, these symbols of equality and justice, and join us. Some of her male colleagues took the banners and headed to the bus outside. She, like most of the others, received a small PRA flag instead. And it was only upon taking it that she realized the wrench was still in her other hand. The clank would resume tomorrow. I can't believe I'm sorry to Yucatan for throwing so much debt at you so quickly. That wasn't really my intention. I just kind of forgot how poor you are. But, we'll try to fix that afterwards, okay? Okay. A walk in the park. Small former secretary of Hacienda and the public credo Antonio Atias Mena maneuver through Capulepec Park, mind moving as fast as his feet. The financier had dismissed the driver waiting at the gates of Lopinos. His home has close enough. So perhaps this exuberant popcorn vendor would delay him as much as the federal district's notorious traffic. What a meeting. Lopez Montillos had laid out his plan for the final 2 years of his term. Expansion of social programs, school construction to complement the textbooks, and a vast infrastructure splurge at the port of Melicos Omca at its centerpiece. All bold, all costly, and even more if you want to build everything by 1968. Why 68? Finding the pesos to put behind presidential plans was Minas' job. They could not be printed, lest inflation slip its leash or the currency collapse. They could not be taxed without endangering the industrial boom that's represented Mexico's future. The CNOP wouldn't stand for taxes anyways. Such were the strictures of stabilizing development, the policy, the prison that Mina had built for himself. But stabilizing development was also the solution. The trust he had won at home and, more importantly, abroad from year after year of growth, fiscal rectitude, currency, and price stability were enough to open the wallet for most tight-fisted bankers. And so Mexico would borrow to grow to borrow. And all worked perfectly until Mena strode through his front door, took in the 18th century French decor for a brief moment, and then darted off to search for his wife, Marta. And he asked her to arrange the dinner with the Rockefellers before heading upstairs to call Secretary of Commerce and Industries, Cienias, and former President Miguel Elemen. He needed every one of their Japanese contacts. But then he paused and said, "What's so special about 1968? Marta knew immediately. What are you? Project available. We can start one project in the Gulf. Okay. What do we want to start? So we've completed this bridge. Ground station. A new stadium. Palace for the state of Mexico. Nuclear power plant. You know what? Yeah, let's build a new nuclear power plant in the Gulf region. If we can make Mexico a true nuclear-powered state, I think that'll pay dividends for us going into the future. That's at least my plan for now. And we have another project available in 0 regions. Okay, then you can get off my screen. If you have nothing else for me, then, you know, don't be here, okay? Dazzled. The lights of the crystalline chandelier bounced and bent around the classical art and ornate furniture lining the Alpico Hilton suite. To the drooling eyes of the Secretary of Hacienda and Public Credit, Antonio Orez Mina, they seem to illuminate and refract off of the countless invisible filaments linking this room. No, this man to the Mexican miracle. The threads, the bonds between the UNAM graduates, the generals lowering their guns to pick up a cigar, the Ishmaelis and welcomes that rolled off unfamiliar tongues, the promises of low taxes and low wages kept those of Article 123 forgotten. The bodies, some porcune, some toned for the screen, all rich, 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 lounging in the sands below. The endless pitches to invest in factories, invest in bonds, to invest in the government, and will invest in the roads, the railways, the power lines, so that you can invest more factories, the oil. The spinning chandelier and the glittering web suspended the nation over the abject ruination and the poverty which it sprang. This man poised at its center, his mustache bristling like the hairs of a hunting spider. Former President Miguel Alemán stopped pouring wine. Perhaps I should cut you off, Antonio. Raul and I are concerned about Matias' spending plans as you relayed them over the phone. Secretary of Commerce and Industry Raul Asinias Lozano nodded, taking another puff of the cigar. That was not my intention. We have adequate fiscal space for His Excellency's social spending priorities. We will also have the beneficial side effect of relieving wage pressures. The infrastructure expansions will lower shipping costs, providing both the demand and supply side support for our manufacturing while keeping inflation in line. Mena took a sip from his half-full wine glass, watching the frowns fade from his colleague's face. Given your role on the Commission of National Tourism, I understand the President's intentions. A golden opportunity is coming. But I will say with that, tune in another time for us to end off this episode. So if you enjoyed it, thumbs up. Did not enjoy it, click thumbs down. You want to see more, subscribe, and goodbye.